It is 65 BCE. You are a Roman soldier under the leadership of Pompey the Great, and as you pursue Mithridates' army, you find the spoils of war. In this case, honey. You eat it, naturally, and an hour or so later, you are sweating, dizzy, and vomiting rapidly. Another hour passes, and you are dead. The usage of mad honey made from the grayanotoxin-containing rhododendron nectar, is one of the first instances of chemical warfare, in which humans harnessed deadly chemicals and unleashed them on their enemies. Throughout the ages, developments in chemistry fueled the transition from using toxins from animals to tailor-making the deadliest poisons, and the catastrophic use of these weapons wounded humanity again and again, despite the restrictions of international law. This is the story of World War I, the Geneva Protocol of 1925, and the final death of chemical weapons. June 17, 1925, Geneva, Le Palais Wilson. Countless tables are arranged in concentric rectangles, and the men seated at them listen with wary attention. 3 agreements would be passed that day, after 6 weeks of intense discussion, 2 regarding weapons trafficking and the 3rd regarding chemical and biological weapons. It is called the Protocol for the Prohibition of the Use in War of Asphyxiating Poisonous or Other Gases and of Bacteriological Methods of Warfare, thankfully better known by the name the Geneva Protocol. As delegates turn their attention to the protocol, they also remember World War I, which ended 7 years before. It was the first time any country had weaponized chemical weapons on such a large scale. Chlorine gas, deployed in the Battle of Ypres by the Germans, advancing like a sickly cloud, a yellow-green low wall, and killing by asphyxiation. Phosgene, even more lethal than chlorine, a choking agent that caused tens of thousands of deaths. Mustard gas, which sought not to kill but to grievously injure and blister, used also at Ypres. A German officer who had been there later wrote, "I am not pleased with the idea of poisoning men. Of course, the entire world will rage about it at first, and then imitate us." And imitate they had. By the end of the war, nearly every country involved was using mustard gas. Nearly 100,000 soldiers had died from exposure to these chemicals, and nearly everyone was totally horrified by what had happened. They reacted with this revolutionary building block, and decades later it would be readdressed and reformed. The 1899 and 1907 Hague Declarations, signed and ratified by all major powers, already banned employment of poison or poisoned arms and employment of arms, projectiles, or material of a nature to cause superfluous injury. But they noted that these were only binding if the war concerned 2 or more contracting powers. You may also note that much of this is subjective. What may be deemed necessary by someone could be marked as grossly unethical by another. Germany was the first to have its chemical weaponry completely banned, and not exactly willingly. So reads the Treaty of Versailles. The use of asphyxiating, poisonous, or other gases, and all analogous liquids, materials, or devices being prohibited, their manufacture and importation are strictly forbidden in Germany. The Geneva Protocol takes its wording from the Versailles Treaty, stating that the high contracting parties agree to extend this prohibition of asphyxiating, poisonous, and other gases and all analogous liquids to the use of bacteriological methods of warfare and agree to be bound as between themselves according to the terms of this declaration. 26 out of the 44 delegates present actually had the power to sign the treaty without the approval of their home government, and they did so. Another dozen countries would sign in the next 3 years, before the entry of the protocol into the force, while submitting reservations that it only applied as a no-first-use policy against other complying nations. The United States actually did not ratify it for several decades, and during that time, World War II. But why would the U.S. ratify it so late? Most people thought of chemical weapons as a necessary evil. They would use it to break stalemates or against enemies. It was seen as destructive, yet fickle, since the area of effect largely relied on wind conditions. But you see, most is the key word. According to Senator James W. Wadsworth and Senator Lawrence Tyson, Gas warfare was the most humane and effective of all weapons, and the War Department would not wish for the ratification of the treaty. And Tyson, at least, had been a brigadier general in World War I. One of his most famous triumphs is his breakthrough of the so-called impregnable Hindenburg Line, the same line where so many Allied and Central soldiers perished by deadly gas, yet he still vouched for its humanity. The same arguments were utilized by organizations such as the American Chemical Society, the members of which wrote letters to Secretary of State Frank Kellogg, telling him that the ratification of the protocol would be a quote-unquote national calamity. They would also write another letter to another influential politician, telling him that Kellogg was receiving misinformation about France. I don't know why I included this, I just thought it was kind of funny. Despite this internal conflict, the U.S. considered itself bound by the protocol's ban throughout the Second World War. The U.S. stockpiled mustard gas and lewisite, but didn't end up using it at all, except on its own soldiers. Soldiers, often handpicked based on their race, would have chemical weapons used on them. The former soldier Rollin Edwards recalls, "It took all the skin off your hands. Your hands just rotted." This shows one of the main flaws of the Geneva Protocol. It did not address chemical weapon use in internal conflicts or experiments. Secondly, the stockpiling issue, as mentioned earlier. This was often done in case another contracting party attacked with chemical weapons first, thus opening the possibility of retaliation. Two other treaties were instrumental in the reform of this ultimately flawed protocol. The Convention on the Prohibition of the Development, Production, and Stockpiling of Bacteriological/Biological and Toxic Weapons and on Their Destruction, or BTWC, of 1973 states, "Each state party to this convention undertakes never in any circumstance to develop, produce, stockpile, or otherwise acquire or retain biological agents, toxins, and equipment that uses them." It, however, also allows another way out. Chemical and biological weapons could be kept if they were diverted to peaceful purposes. It must be assumed that many countries did so, for in 1997, the CWC entered into the force, detailing instructions excluding completely the possibility of the use of chemical weapons. This convention also defines much of its terminology, closing many loopholes of the Geneva Protocol and the BTWC, and as of July 7, 2023, not a single chemical weapon belongs to the United States of America. But what was the point of all this? What does this century-old piece of international legislation have to do with us today? Well, it was the first step to banning chemical weapons completely, and without it, World War II would have been so much more of a nightmare, although Japan and Germany both ended up breaking it. It set a strict moral code about something that many people fared terribly, or even were sickly fascinated by, as seen by the opposition against its ratification. And most of all, it proves the importance of growth and change. It was not perfect at all, but the thing is, the contracting countries saw this, and revised and improved it with new protocols. And if all this can be done on an international scale, then why not in our lives? Do not sweep misdeeds or mistakes under the rug, but acknowledge them and tell yourself how you will do better next time. Do not be afraid of change, because ultimately, history and life are both journeys, each with their own wars, but also with their own victories. Quotes of note today. Vice is a monster of so frightful mine as to be hated needs but to be seen, yet seen too oft, familiar with her face. We first endure, then pity, then embrace. Alexander Pope. Years of love have been forgot in the hatred of a minute. Edgar Allan Poe.